All right, today we are talking about how to learn about the business of speaking, that is speaking on stage, and how to leverage speaking in a business. We're talking to the president of one of the largest speaking bureaus in the country. His name is Barrett Cordero. I'll tell you about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders, and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of the show. You know that if you've listened to this before, you've heard we've had some amazing guests on here, including some of the clients of the man I'm going to be talking to in a second. We've had Netflix, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation, Blizzard, Redfin, you name it. Lots of great episodes in the archives. So check those out so you can listen to those. And of course, this episode brought to you by my company, Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done For You podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn all about what we do at rise25.com. All right. And my guest here today, Barrett Cordero. Barrett is president of BigSpeak Speakers Bureau. And under his direction, BigSpeak Speakers Bureau has been listed in Inc. magazine's 5,000 fastest growing companies for 6 consecutive years, which is absolutely insane. He's been with the company for about 17, 18 years now. We're going to hear about his journey, how he got to where he is today. He's coming to us from beautiful Santa Barbara, California, which is where I went to college. He went to college at UCSB, one of the most beautiful parts of the country. If you haven't been there, go visit sometime. So Barrett, it's such a pleasure to have you here. And I want to hear about, first of all, you grew up in beautiful Santa Barbara, so you knew it, and you went to college there. And we were kind of talking beforehand about one of the limitations to growing up in such a beautiful town, at least 20 years ago, is that it didn't have a big industry. And if you wanted to stay living there, your family's from there and everything, you grew up there, there were limited career opportunities. I ended up leaving. I ended up going to Washington, D.C. and Sacramento, and then here I am in the Bay Area because I didn't see those opportunities for me. What was that like for you as you're graduating from college and you're thinking you want to stay? What were your options?
Absolutely. And thanks, John, for having me. And I hope I provide some useful information for your audience. And I really welcome this opportunity. So the question was, what was it like growing up here? And then how did it change over time?
Yeah. And, you know, what were you seeing as your options if you wanted to stay in this town?
The internet definitely helped this area go through a renaissance, because you're right. Growing up here and right around college, it was still a limited market. It was the military economy, you know, the defense industry organizations, you know, you had accountants, lawyers, and doctors, and some agriculture, but there definitely was not a technological corporate scene at all. Now, since then, in the last 20 years, we have multiple publicly traded companies here in Santa Barbara and from Santa Barbara, like Sonos and Procore and Deckers and Invoca, you know, and many more. So it's been wonderful to see those companies thrive here, see the impact that's had in the community, a lot more jobs, which has meant more housing. And sure, there's a little bit more cars on the road, but ultimately, I think the prospect of hopefully my daughter's working here in 20 years and living here is much higher than it was when me and my friends were getting out of college and we looked around thinking, how are we going to make this work? And half of us got lucky and then the other half ended up in different places.
Right. And you mentioned Invoca. I had the co-founder, Jason Spivak, on this show, and he was amazing, really interesting insights. You end up going, though, we were talking beforehand about one of the few industries is hospitality. That's one of them. Higher education. A lot of people in their 20s are in graduate school or something like that. You end up going into hospitality, and I'm interested to know, like, what you bring from that. You actually worked at the Four Seasons, which is, you know, a spectacular place to work. What do you bring from that experience to the work that you do now?
Well, hospitality was a natural first step because I'd spent many years as a waiter. I was at Caro's for, I think, 5 years off and on, helped me pay my way through college. And you learn you certainly learn the importance of service, you know, being friendly, being timely, being organized, working well with others, juggling resource issues depending on food and teammates, et cetera. So when I was thinking of jobs and I saw an opening for the Four Seasons kind of entry-level manager position, it made sense to interview. And they agreed that my thinking was on point. So, they take a shot on me, and I worked there for about 4 or 5 months, and it was an awesome opportunity. I really got a good exposure into a large, successful organization, what a potential career path could look like. I also, I think, learned at that point in time that it seemed a little too predictable for me, and I wanted to explore more and maybe take on a little more risk. And that's what initially, I'd say, kind of nudged me into going into the technology sector. I worked at Commission Junction at that time.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was almost like a Goldilocks type of thing. Like, this one's too hot, this one's too cold. Like, you have like kind of the corporate experience, and then you go work for Commission Junction, which was one of the very early affiliate marketing companies in that industry in the early days of the internet. And how was that different from the Four Season experience?
Yeah, it was a lot different because it was a newer company. There was clearly already a history, and there was some establishments within the organization. But in that atmosphere, I got then exposure to how a new age tech company is running, and compare it to a Four Seasons, which has a special, Four Seasons has a specialty in management. So it's much more, I'll say, thorough and kind of methodical about how they go about things. Whereas CJ at the time was a little bit more open and alternative to what they would take bets on and experiment with and risk to fuel growth. So I found it stimulating. I liked it. The more I learned about the space of affiliate marketing, I think I got a little less interested, and I wasn't quite sure on where and what I would do next within that organization or industry. So a woman who, I have great gratitude for, told me, hey, there's this little company called BigSpeak. They're a speakers bureau, and they're opening up a position for a sales agent, and I think you should interview. So
and now you had a major in biz econ, as we say, at Santa Barbara. What was it like for you going from that to sales?
I never thought of myself as a salesperson. And I think as time has gone on, I've realized it is a natural place for me to play, and I like it. And biz econ at UCSB was pretty theoretical. There was a lot of economic theory.
Yeah.
I actually really liked I almost did a minor in accounting. I enjoyed those classes a lot because they were so specific and practical, like financial statement analysis and, accounting.
Helpful skills to have now.
Yeah. And so I like that, but there wasn't too much of that within the biz econ degree at UCSB. But it was a good starting off point. And I always had I would say, just an instinct to want to learn about business and learn more about business. So for me, it was the right major because I got a little bit more exposure. But I think now the university has an even more robust program with like a technology management program. They bring the business community in. Whereas back then, I would say it was probably much more academic. Whereas now there's actual active engagements with the business community in town.
Now, and what was it like working for a speakers bureau located in Santa Barbara? Now, I think many people listening to this would think like a speakers bureau would naturally be in like Las Vegas or New York, or especially for you as a young, hungry sales agent and educational consultant working for this company. It seems like it would make a lot more sense because you probably have to hustle and talk to, people that are booking speakers and recruit speakers to come join your bureau. But you're in Santa Barbara, right? I mean, I imagine you're hitting the phones a lot. What was it like?
Yeah, you're completely on the money. If we were in New York City or Los Angeles, it would have been a lot more natural. Well, Jonathan and Elise Wygant founded this company, and their original goal was to raise the consciousness of the Fortune 500 and change the world. And then we joke that once the name changed from Consciousness Unlimited to BigSpeak, and our initials became BS, we got commercialized. So, that, but truly that's our roots. And that's what we're passionate about is working with individuals who have, quality substance, are authentic, inspirational, and bringing that into organizations and audiences to help them get inspired and informed.
So I'm here in Marin County, which sounds like the place where something called Consciousness Unlimited would be located. Were you involved in that when they rebranded, and when did that happen?
I wasn't. It was before my time. It was right in 2000. But Jonathan had the idea, and Big Sur at Esalen. So
okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
But at some point they must have been like, okay, this is the direction we're going, and this name is holding us back. Yeah, it was part of it. And so when I interviewed with Jonathan at his home, I think it was in 2007. It was a 5-person company, and it was in his back house, and his office was next to the garage. And I found Jonathan completely inspiring and interesting, and intriguing, and someone I could learn from. And the opportunity of being a salesperson was compelling. So I took a leap, and it's obviously worked out really well. And yes, in the beginning, it was a steep learning curve, being on the phone a lot, sending emails, learning this space of this niche industry of representing people, booking people, structuring deals, contractually, completing the transaction, and then facilitating the logistics, et cetera. But no day's the same, and I'm constantly learning. And I mean, how many people get to say they get paid to watch TED Talks and YouTube videos, right? And then, or read these books and book them for business. So I still love the work after 17 years. Yeah, that's great. And now I look at your website and we see Kevin O'Leary, we see Damon John, Magic Johnson, Steve Wozniak, Mark Randolph. You got an amazing array of different speakers on your platform. So if I'm a well-known person who has a best-selling book or whatever, and thinking about choosing a speakers bureau, it's a little bit easier decision. But back then, it must have been a struggle to convey the value that you would bring when you were still getting started.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different world. We sent out physical catalogs. In the moment
with
you printed
glossy pictures of people,
in the moment you printed a catalog, it was out of date. Something changed, right?
Yeah.
And we'd send out a DVD. So we had metal filing cabinets of DVDs, or actually VHS and then DVD. Mm-hmm. So when the smartphone came out, obviously none of us knew what that was going to do, but it accelerated the communication speed and abilities of all parties, which expanded our industry. And the same thing happened with, say, TED and YouTube. There was concern or initial feedback. Well, because now speeches are available, no one's going to book them in person.
Right.
It's actually been the exact opposite. It's popularized speeches and popularized content to the point where it's also expanded the market as well. So it's been interesting to watch that growth curve occur, because we're 30 people, and last year in 2022 we did 42 million in speaking fees.
Amazing.
And if you would have told me that was possible in 2007, I would have said how. Physically, we couldn't even figure out how you would do that.
Yeah.
And I think our great team is actually capable of even more. So I'm excited to see where we go.
And so, not long around the corner from 2007 was 2008, the whole economic downturn. What was that like for the company? That was still in kind of the early days.
That was horrible, is basically the word I would use. We actually created what we call the market correction reset strategy plan. This was an outline that we had that was based off the 2008 recession, where we experienced a 60% dip in the market, and then we climbed out and we finished the year down 33%, which is not bad considering how extreme 2008 was. But when COVID came, instantly our
dusted it
market
off.
shut down. So we went from sales to zero sales, and we had actually just purchased a building for our growing team to move into, and we were scared and worried and thought, boy, our plans we have to throw out the window because they're not extreme enough. So we had to lay off half the company, and that was painful. It was really painful. Really good people, and to let people go in a at a terrible time like that too. Just felt bad on many levels. And we weren't sure what was going to happen. Thankfully, gradually the market came back and actual virtual engagements became very popular. And I would say COVID accelerated the interest in virtual events probably by 10 years. And I think once these, the Apple Vision Pro headset comes out and the others, that's going to be right here on the desk for all of us. And we will most certainly have a meeting like this with those on, or a corporate event where, if you're one of these Fortune 500 companies, instead of only having your 300 leaders go to Orlando for a conference, you can also have that live broadcast to your 30,000 employees, and they can all put on the headset and be in the immersive experience of the guest speaker and the executive team, et cetera. I think that would have been a slower change if it wasn't for COVID, because when we couldn't meet, virtual became a thing. And for a year and a half, it was the go-to replacement for in-person engagements. And now we see hybrid, lots of in-person, lots of virtual, and they both make sense for different reasons at different times.
And so once the early days, March 2020, April 2020, once we'd gotten over that initial shock to the system, then did your company almost go back to normal? You were still booking gigs, but they were virtual instead of in person, or was it still like not at all normal?
No, it was very similar. It was very similar. Some minor adjustments, but essentially it was the same type of transaction and customer and stakeholders and clients.
Less travel involved.
Yeah, less travel.
You have to worry about that.
In fact, I mean, for celebrities, it became really popular because they were available. They couldn't be on movie sets or TV shows. Yeah. And so they enjoyed these virtual events, and then clients loved the idea of having celebrities when they normally couldn't afford them. So that market grew. There was a lot of silver linings.
Many of the interviewees that I've had on the show said, like we had to do layoffs or everything. We were just scared witless in the first few months, and then it immediately shifted, and then they had to hire everyone back and then some, or just they didn't know how to fulfill the work that they weren't expecting was going to come in and actually did. Yeah,
I would like to say now, after two big crises, I'll hit the next one a little bit differently. I do like to say around here, calm waters make poor sailors. So I do think, rough storms help us get better at navigating future ones. There does seem to be a pattern when a market shifts or a world event occurs where initially it's like the emergency brakes pulled and everyone's worried and things are different for a couple months. And then somehow, some way, humanity and stakeholders figure out, okay, what's the way to adapt and move forward?
Yeah.
That's definitely what happened in the financial crisis and during COVID and likely in whatever recession's coming next.
Whatever the next thing is. I want to ask, so I've been, involved in different high profile individuals, mostly through working in politics and presidential campaigns. I've been around, presidential candidates and presidents and stuff like that. I know how much logistics goes into those things, how challenging, those things are. And I can only imagine what it's like for you, booking and organizing the calendar around some high profile celebrity. And I just want to know, how do you do it? Like, how do you handle some world famous individual, coordinating schedules with, speaking opportunity and all the little things, the green M&Ms, all the stuff that comes up along the way?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's intimate and it's personal by definition, yet we have to scale ourselves as well. So we have to scale.
Right. So it couldn't just be you, the one who knows how to handle those personal touches, right?
And we have a wonderful team, and we all have different roles, and of course, we all play a part in these relationships. And we need to be masters in our roles of how we do them. And so we have a really experienced team, and I'm so proud of them. We do very well with these high-profile individuals and some of the world's best companies. We've learned you definitely want to figure out where you can systemize and not try to remember everything or be shorthand. Leverage the CRM to really help empower us to be smarter about choices we're making and decisions that are getting made. So that's definitely a part of it. It is intimate though, and it is relational. And like any good relationship, friendship or family, whatever it may be, a workplace, those elements is what we also bring into this business, right? It's like good values, it's communicating, having those crucial conversations that are uncomfortable yet help us move forward or gain clarity. Being consistent, working hard, being open to different solutions, constantly coming from a place of, care, realizing, hey, even though there's a transaction at play here, it's really though, and these high profile individuals are leaving their families, they're leaving their life to not go speak just for 45 minutes, a day or two to go to this engagement. And then it's the same on the other end for the buyer, for the host, that, they're not just filling a slot in their conference, they're bringing someone in front of their entire company or a lot of their company, and their reputation's at stake on how that person shows up and what their bedside manner is, and how they deliver. So it's definitely a little bit of a soup.
And how do you deal with when there's a letdown, when you're dealing with the customer and, the speaker shows up and whatever reason? I can think of probably lots of examples, but there was one that I went to about a year ago where a high profile former professional athlete spoke and kind of just phoned it in, showed up, had nothing prepared, stood on stage, kind of like winged it the whole time. And, frankly, as a former speechwriter, I was like, geez, like you couldn't prepare anything or pay someone to prepare it for you, how do you navigate that type of situation?
Well, I do like to always remind the team of the Buffett quote about takes 20 years to build a reputation and 20 minutes to lose it. Yeah. So,
and no doubt you take some blame sometimes, even if it's completely undeserved, right? It wasn't your fault.
Completely. And 100%. And we, of course, know that and share that. It's interesting you bring this up because we just talked about this as a sales team this week, and we did a little bit of a training as a role playing because we most certainly have had those instances, but we just wanted to practice how do we go about those. It's tough to hear. You definitely need to keep asking questions to understand more, like, where did the speaker miss the mark? Where in the process did we perhaps miss the mark? We like to usually suggest doing a survey of the audience because that's really helpful, because sometimes the coordinator or the intimate party involved in the transaction has a much different angle than maybe the audience. So we like to compare those two and get kind of multiple viewpoints. Ultimately, though, I'll tell you, of all the tough moments like that we've had, or not of all, but most, it ends up making for a better relationship. Us and the customer realize, boy, we can make it. If we can make it through this difficult situation, which is sometimes not a bad speech, it can just be, world events or weather. That does affect our industry, and it's a scramble, and there's a lot of stress. And when they see that we're there to help and navigate that, and we can work with each other, then usually it's a good foundation builder for more work together.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, you were talking beforehand and you're dyslexic. And there's many who have dyslexia who compensate by empowering other people or delegation or systems, different ways of kind of accommodating and working around it. Sometimes they find it's a huge superpower because of that. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you've kind of adapted in your world?
Sure. Happy to. When I was younger, I think I lacked perspective and just, I just kind of navigated as best I could. And my mother got me a tutor, at various times. And I kind of had to work twice as hard for a long time just to, make it by. That definitely instilled a good work ethic in me, that I think I've carried forward. Since then I've realized it to kind of make note of how people think differently, and then you work together with individuals to collaborate and work on problems together. And when doing that, it can be really powerful. And sometimes now it's also humorous. Like my wife and I get a kick out of, like, if we go camping, we put all the pieces out, and I immediately start grabbing them and putting them together. And she looks at me like, what are you doing? Like, we got to look at the instructions. And I look at her going like, well, what are you doing? It's a tent. We just put it together. But that's how she and I approach, problem solving differently. And in her case, like, she does brilliantly with educational tasks, multiple choice, all those things. For me, multiple choice is a death sentence. Blue books, I do great. If you give me a chance to explain myself, I can get the point across. So in the workplace, I most definitely, talk with colleagues and figure out and leverage where each of us have our strengths to work through challenges. I think too, dyslexia for me, that also has, it's kind of disarming for the ego. Like I'm very comfortable with being wrong. And so when I make wrong decisions, I just own it, and it's kind of water off my back. I think as I age, I observe a lot of ego with individuals and their difficulty admitting failures or admitting, a mistake. Whereas I definitely err on the side of, hey, mistakes happen constantly, but that's also because I'm dyslexic, I think. So just keep on moving forward. So I definitely would encourage people to realize there is silver linings to it, and not to get too discouraged when school or certain institutional programs may send you a message like you're not going to do well, or you're not doing well. That's most certainly not the case.
Yeah. I mean, frequently, honestly, that becomes the fuel that really moves people forward too. So many times I've interviewed people who have said that, as someone who didn't believe in me, that really motivated me to prove them wrong. And I love to hear that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it also, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, with entrepreneurs, you also see more of, call it, the outliers in that group, or in businesses where people have taken risks and move forward because they're accustomed to facing obstacles and challenges along the way, and kind of pioneering and pushing through. Yeah. I want to ask you about, because I used to be a speechwriter and studied a lot of different speakers and saw some amazing speakers in my day. You've seen so many TED Talks, you've seen so many speakers, so many clients. What are a few that stand out? Like either experiences of seeing one of your clients speak that just shook you or moved you, maybe some we haven't even heard of before. Yeah. Oh, I got so many, as you can imagine. I constantly am referencing a speech or a book or a podcast or, something I saw. Most of my learnings come from the people we get to work with. One of my all-time favorites would be Mark Randolph, who co-founded Netflix. Did you interview him by chance? I did. Yeah. That's how we connected, actually, was through Mark, because that's Mark, right. Then I connected another person that I know about Mark possibly speaking, and then he connected me to you. And that's right. So there was a all comes full circle. Yeah. And there's a YPO connection there. That's right. For some reason, my memory was hinged on the YPO component. Well, then, as you know, but maybe if some of your audience didn't hear, he co-founded Netflix. He's also been partner in Looker and other ventures that have been extremely successful. And, he has a book out now, and the original title he was kind of considering was Nobody Knows Anything. And he's basically kind of, poking fun at, hey, when most of us have new ideas or we're pioneering, nobody knows if it's going to be successful. There's a lot of people who think they know, or who give you an opinion if they think it's going to be successful. The entrepreneur doesn't even know. So, you need to go out and you need to test your idea, and you need to be out there, and you're going to learn a lot by doing, opposed to thinking about it. And Mark is so gracious and humble, and he's well-rounded. He also talks about how he never missed a Wednesday dinner with his family, and his kids and wife still love him. And I think we don't hear enough about that when people are this, a wildly successful person.
he's part of the NOLS, the National Outdoor Leadership Society, which encourages youth to go into the outdoors. So I really respect Mark. I've learned a lot from him. It's a true pleasure to get to represent him and work with him. And every time he speaks, I learn something and walk away feeling good.
That's great. I also want to ask you about what would have been some of the challenges for you personally leading this organization, going from 6 people in the back house to now you're the head of this organization. 30 people or so, you said, are depending on you for their livelihood. How have you up-leveled your own skills? You mentioned YPO, which is an amazing organization. You've been a part of it for quite some time, which has little, groups together that meet together. But what are some ways that you've up-leveled your own skills as you've grown into this leadership position? Well, you've been in it for a while now, but
my school is still in session. That's for sure. That's for sure, and it probably will be for many, many more years. I think good leaders read a lot. Definitely reading. I always take away something from a book, even if it's one thing in amongst 300 pages. I'd also say listening to podcasts, watching speeches from those who have done it or researched others. That's very helpful. Getting help. I tap every resource there is. I've had an executive coach. I've had a therapist. I've been part of YPO. I've had mentors. You name it. I'm constantly tapping into resources to support me to either, carry the responsibility or to learn or to process my thinking and work through whatever opportunity or obstacle is in front of me. I wouldn't say it's one thing, it's many things. Yeah. And then of course, family and friends. And I've learned the hard way when we started, my wife and I were fortunate enough to have 2 daughters. One is currently 6 and one is 3. I started discounting exercise and I thought, okay, I'll be more present with dad. And I got work responsibilities and that caught up with me. I started to have physical symptoms over time from all the stress. And so now I'm very regimented. I work out at lunch. And 10 years ago, I would have said I could never work out at lunch. I don't have the energy to work out at lunch. It's got to be like at night or the morning or something. And I've made it work. And, I'm committed to that. And for me, it makes a huge difference, exercising on the regular. And, diet, pay attention to, what I consume, all those kind of basics, I'll say, but they're impactful.
Your daughters are still young, but since you mentioned them, I want to ask you about, this is also top of mind for me. I have 4 kids. Oldest just turned 13. Youngest is 4. But you're raising them in an affluent community. You've got celebrity clients. You've got, companies earning a pretty penny. What are your thoughts on raising kids so they're not entitled, so that they have drive and ambition?
Yeah. First of all, wow, that you have 4 children. I think anybody with 3 or more, like, you deserve a medal. Like, the state should send you something in the mail. Like, we recognize you as a community hero. That's fantastic. That's awesome. The sacrifice that you've made and what you've done to do that. That's more, I think, than building a company. It's a great question. And it's something I have thought about. I have definitely, my father unfortunately passed away this past year. But I remind them frequently that he came from Mexico when he was 8 years old and moved to San Francisco with his mother and, went after the American dream. And I think it's really important for them to know that's why we have the Cordero last name. Now, I embarrassingly don't speak Spanish. As a dyslexic, I'm still learning English. But I think they know that's a part of our story, and we're cognizant of the circles we're in. And so we've currently been conscious about having them go to public schools so that there is diversity and they're exposed to the community at large. Because I do think that's really healthy, because if we stay in our narrow lane, they would have a kind of an asymmetrical experience.
Yeah. I want to wrap up with my last question, which is my gratitude question. As you look around at especially peers and contemporaries, maybe others in your industry, however you want to define that, it could be other speakers, bureau heads, it could be other presidents of company, other business leaders in your community. Who would you want to just acknowledge or thank publicly for helping you in your journey?
I think, because we talked a little bit about business today, who comes forward to me is this woman, Deborah Stowers. When I was in high school, my junior year, it was career day and she was a stockbroker and she came in and explained what she does. And at the end, she said, "Hey, I have 2 summer internship positions. Who would like to, try it?" And me and this girl, Suzanne, raised our hand. And Deb, welcomed us into the stockbrokers that summer. We put on our formal clothes, wore a tie back then, and we made our calls and did those things. And Deborah kept in touch with me, and she was the one who ended up working with BigSpeak for a year or two, and who, called me years later and said, "Hey, I think you would be good at this." So if it wasn't for Deb, I would have never gotten into this industry. And I think it illustrates the point of how, she didn't need to go to career day and talk to a bunch of children about what she does. I didn't need to raise my hand and go to a summer internship that paid nothing, but, I got some experience. But because she took a chance, made some choices, and I did as well. And, we fostered a relationship. In my case, the direction of my life was changed. So I'm completely grateful for that. And I have a lot of people I'm grateful for. That would be hours and hours. But today, that's the person who really comes forward to me.
Well, thank you to Deb. Barrett, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you, and learn more about BigSpeak? Thanks,
John. Probably LinkedIn. And then, of course, bigspeak.com is our company. And my profile's on LinkedIn. And it's really been nice to get to talk with you, John. And I hope we get to hang out in Santa Barbara at some point. And please consider me available if the community has any questions or anything to follow up on.
Sounds great. Thanks, Barrett.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.